Hello and welcome to the One About Podcast, the show where we think we know what we're talking about on a different topic each week. This week we're discussing a classic and endlessly beloved game from the PS1 era. This is the one about Final Fantasy VII. I'm your host, Dean. I also go by EndlessCola in places around the internet. And this week I am joined by, as usual, Avalanche Reject, Jordan. What's going on, man?
Nothing much. My application got lost in the mail. I didn't actually get a denial. Okay.
Yeah, sure, buddy. what do you got going on this week, man?
Not too much. I gave up on 12, but I'll circle back to it again, I guess. Other than that, just playing some Red Dead and Rocket League when I have some free time.
Red Dead 1 or 2?
Two. However, I am encouraged by the recent rumors about them remaking the first one and putting it in the exact same game because the locations are all still
Wait,
there.
what?
Yeah. I read a rumor on I don't know how good the rumor is, of course, but their online updates for Red Dead 2 have been absent, right? I mean,
Hmm.
GTA 5, they specifically made an announcement. The first thing in their PlayStation 5 like reveal that they did a few weeks ago, the first thing they showed was GTA 5 an update and then that is coming to PlayStation 5. So they have given unlimited amounts of time and money into GTA 5 and they've probably made an unlimited amount of of money from that game. But Red Dead 2 has been absent. No big online updates. It's still in a kind of a haphazard state. The online is really mediocre, just really underwhelming. When they could do a lot with it, a lot of really awesome things. So I read a rumor a week ago that this is because they're remaking the first Red Dead, but they're putting it in Red Dead 2. So they're not releasing it traditionally. They're bringing it in as DLC because the locations, from what I understand, the majority of them are actually already in the Red Dead 2 map, which is true. There's a town called Blackwater, and that's really where Red Dead 1 primarily takes place in the surrounding areas. So if they do that, that would be incredible. Find some way to just package the DLC, put it in the same game, and allow you to play it seamlessly.
Did you not play Red Dead 1?
Nope.
Oh,
I
what?
missed
Why'd you
that one.
decide to play Red Dead 2 then?
Um, I mean, it felt like a sequel that I could just dive into. I started with The Witcher 2. I didn't lose anything. Sometimes
Hold on, you haven't played The Witcher 1?
no. No, I'm
Dude,
not I'm not playing the first Witcher. No.
bro, I asked you about this like 2 weeks ago and you're like, "Nah, The Witcher 1 sucks, just play 2." You haven't even played it.
No,
What
no,
the
I
hell,
own
man?
it. I own it. I've played it a little bit, not beaten. Sorry, I'm using play as beaten the game. I have
Oh,
I,
okay.
I've
Okay.
played a little bit of The Witcher 1, but it was really dated and rough and I just kind of wanted to get to Witcher 2 so I could play Witcher 3. So
I
I
I just wanted to get to the second one so I could play the third one.
well yeah, cuz
Just jump to the third one.
well no, the second Witcher is absolutely worth playing. That game is incredible in its own and these major decisions that you make in the second game carry over seamlessly into the third one. I still have a tattoo that I got in the second game from some drunk night that as like one of like the little like surprise little side quests that you can do. You get hammered, you make bad decisions, you do dumb things, you wake up naked, and you get a tattoo on your neck. And the tattoo is only there if you've played through The Witcher 2. So it's in The Witcher 3 as well. And the tattoo is like of this gang that's prejudiced against elves and
Mm.
my character really wasn't prejudiced against elves. I just mistakenly got into this whole scenario. So now in The Witcher 3, I still get jeers and people are like weird about it too. Like they bring it up. And I'm like, how is it?
Really?
Yeah. So it was like, it's a legitimate occurrence of I regret that night and it's in a video game. It's like, I didn't mean to do this. I was drunk. Now
You know
I'm
what's
paying for it.
You know what's really interesting to me about that is like since The Witcher 2 isn't available on console, like console gamers never will never have that experience with that game.
No,
Well,
they
I
won't.
shouldn't say never. Like they could like port The Witcher 2 and then make that happen, I suppose, but
They won't do it at this point. There's no reason to, but they like there are major character deaths that get carried over. There are major relationships and quest lines that get brought up in
oh
the third
shit.
Witcher. So like there are love interests that I had in the second Witcher that were brought over that I could like talk about different things that we did and decisions that I made in the second Witcher game, in the third one about like with this character, it's incredible. It's the best sequel experience that I've had since like Mass Effect, which the whole game was built around, your decisions matter. Even spoiler alert, it didn't, but your decisions
It
really
kind
make a
of did.
big. Well, between the first, second, and like for smaller things and stuff, like the end of the third game was just it's kind of
Yeah. I
weird.
mean, it was so bad that they infamously had to redo it, but
Yeah, so that's what I've been up to. That and trying to struggle through Final Fantasy XII's early game battle system, which is terrible, and the story is just kind of bland so far. Honestly, my favorite part of Final Fantasy 12 within the first 10 hours that I've played is getting completely wrecked by that T-Rex in the very beginning. That was my favorite
mm,
part cuz you
dude, I had this moment where like I was playing it and I saw the T Rex and I was like, this is gonna be just like Xenoblade. If I attack that T
yeah,
Rex, I'm about to get fucked
yeah,
up, dude.
I knew yeah, right away. I'm like, "Oh, I
And
know
then
why you're here."
yeah, yeah. And so I went and saved because there's the save right outside the town, right next to that spot. And I came back, I was like, let's find out. Yup, we're dead as shit.
Yeah, it
but like what
happened.
but like when I came back to shit, what's the name of the main city that you're in? I don't even remember. But when I came back there, the first thing that I did is I went out there and fucked that T-Rex up.
I'm not at a point where I can do that yet, but I did the same thing. I saved, I walked out to the T-Rex, initiated combat, and I feel like he just stepped on me and I died. It was so immediate. It was the first thing I did. The first mission you leave through the south gate, I think, south or the east gate, whichever one, and then you see him wandering the plains. I'm like, oh, save, walk up, dead. So that
Yep.
was kind of fun, I guess. I don't really know why he's there. There's not enough food for him there.
Yeah, I mean Final Fantasy 12 is an interesting beast, man. I'm with you. Like I had to put it down for a little while, but you know what? Like I even if I wanted to at this point, I can't quit because my wife is all into the story. So now I'm kind of playing it so that she can experience it.
My wife, I I tried to play Final Fantasy VII Remake with her there and be like, "Oh, you should experience this story. It made a big
Mm.
impact on my life. It's one of the most important video games that I've ever played. I love the
Mm.
story." And she fell asleep through chapter 12. I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Like those pivotal part of the entire freaking video game, you're going to fall asleep?" Like she didn't care. I'm like, "Oh, okay." But then I watched Hamilton for 3 hours today, so, let's dive into it. Yeah.
So as oh my god, I might have to have you take over this. Like I can't. I'm like seriously losing my voice over here. Um so as a lot of our audience knows, as I know that you know, I'm big into RPGs.
Yo.
But for a lot of people, this was like their first RPG ever. And I think that Final Fantasy VII is really important because it brought the JRP genre, or in a lot of people's cases, the RPG genre as a whole, into their viewfinder for the very first time. So with that in mind, like was that the case with you, or were you cognizant of RPGs before this and kind of played this at the time? Like what does that look like for you?
So I definitely have a storied past when it comes to RPGs. They are my favorite genre of video game. I wish I had more time to play them because there are some incredible titles out there that just consume so many hours that I don't have, right?
Mm,
And
mm,
when I was younger, it was not my first experience. So it was my first JRPG. Um,
mm,
I, I,
okay.
I will give you that. My first RPG, if you want to be technical, I guess, was definitely Legend of Zelda. I would have to
Mm,
say,
that's a stretch.
I think I played Ocarina of Time. And,
Bro, this is gonna be another tangent for a second here, but are we really gonna call The Legend of Zelda an RPG?
yes, in the
Like,
most basic
I,
way, I
like
guess.
I want to be clear. Like, I'm not calling you out for this. I'm just curious as to your thought process on that because I
I,
would never in a million
yeah.
years call that an RPG.
So maybe it's just a fault of definition, but I've always thought of RPGs as literal role playing games. So I'm playing the role of Link going through a story. And usually,
Wouldn't that
stories,
be literally every game that you could possibly play?
yes, but RPGs are a spectrum, right? It's there's a
Sure.
spectrum of things that it goes from, you know, as something as simple as a Link to the Past being an RPG to like what's the most complicated RPG that I can probably think of at the top of my head? Probably like it's like Xenoblade maybe or Morrowind maybe I guess Elder Scrolls Morrowind. Like
Is the
super
most
comp.
complicated?
I'm trying to think of things that have complicated mechanics, a number of different systems involved to really customize your character. And
Mhm.
the Elder Scrolls series stands out to me. The combat of Xenoblade stands out to me immediately because the combat is super convoluted. I tried to go back into Xenoblade 2 after playing for about 10 hours. I was like, okay, well, let me try to just pick up from where I left off. No way. I was so lost and I had no idea what I was doing with the battle system. I was like, this is terrible. I need to just get the remake of the original and just play that one.
So, out of curiosity, I just pulled up Wikipedia on RPGs to see what they have to say about the subject. And it says single player role playing video games form a loosely defined genre of computer and console games with origins in role playing games such as Dungeons and Dragons, on which they base much of their terminology, settings, and game mechanics. This translation changes the experience of the game, providing a visual representation of the world, but emphasizing statistical character development over collaborative interactive storytelling. I would say that that's a fair definition.
That's a very good definition. So it's a fault of my own internal definition of what an RPG is. I guess a more traditional way to describe Ocarina of Time or any Legend of Zelda game would be an adventure game, right?
Oh, don't get me started on adventure games, dude. Like, I don't. That's a whole fucking rabbit hole for me.
What do you define it as? What's your definition?
um, I mean, like, again, I'm not trying to like dogpile on you or anything. Like,
Well, like I can't
I'm
think of
just saying, like, calling anything that's not an adventure game is a trigger button for me. Like, I hate that
I
shit
don't
because
know how to,
an adventure game
yeah.
is a really specific thing. I
I just
would
don't
say
know how to
that
define
Zelda's,
it.
yeah,
I don't know how to define it then.
and that's fair. If it were me, I would probably call it an action role play or an action adventure game, maybe with some loose RPG mechanics, depending on which one you're talking about.
Yeah,
Zelda 2 is, I think you could make a fair argument, is an actual RPG.
that one I think is the most RPG of all of them. That one and
Yeah.
Skyward Sword, awkwardly enough.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but like
Anyway, I
yeah.
told you
So
this is going to be a whole tangent.
so that was it's not my first RPG experience. Okay, if I change my definition, let me see. Is it my first one? I want to say yes.
Now, did you play like D&D as a kid or anything like that?
No, I only
Okay.
briefly tried to, tried to get into it as an adult, and
Okay.
it's difficult.
Okay. I was just curious. So, it's probably your first like RPG console or like true RPG.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I would have to say that that is my first true RPG, although I'm struggling with whether I played Chrono Trigger
Oh.
first. I can't remember. I want to say that I played Final Fantasy VII first.
So, at best, it was a very early RPG for you.
Yes, a very early and an extremely impactful one because
Sure.
I threw everything at that game when I was young.
Sure.
Like that was my favorite video game for a very long time, and it's still up there. Obviously, newer mechanics and better games have come out, right? But even going back, like it's it, it's such a love of mine that the older battle system and everything doesn't weigh on me. It doesn't feel like it's aged as much as some other games. Hell, Final Fantasy 12 feels like it's aged way more than 7.
So, I, I would agree with that if not for the fact that games like Xenoblade are still around and pumping out and getting critical acclaim and all that because it's basically the same battle system as games like Xenoblade. Do you prefer the ATB system to traditional turn-based?
So the Final Fantasy games have changed it up a lot, and like 10 kind of had an ATB, but it was based off of like your speed stat, which gave the order
Hmm.
of operation, like the order of the rounds themselves, and then the other games, the PlayStation era games, all had static ATBs. I think that were just time based, which you could enhance, and then the 2D ones, six had ATB, and then my memory's foggy with the other ones. Maybe they were straight classic turn based, but I like the ATB. I do. If I try to be unbiased about it, why do I like it? I like it because you can modulate it. So it's not just the speed stat for Final Fantasy VII in particular affected the growth, I believe, of your limit gauge.
That sounds right.
I
I'm not
know that's how it is in
positive.
I know that's how it is in Remake. So your speed stat
Ugh.
affected how your limit gauge grew in the remake, if you ever even used your limits. But
Dude, I did not have as much trouble with limit breaks as you did in
I
that.
never used them. I guess I
Dude,
was
I felt like
uh,
I had them all the time.
I guess I was just too good at the game. I don't know. I just
Sweet
never needed
Jesus,
them.
stop.
So I I do love the ATB. I really enjoy the concept of it. I enjoy that I can alter the enemy's ATB by using magic. I enjoy that I can haste myself and enhance it. I
Mhm,
like how it introduces a lot more blue magic for stop, haste, slow, sleep, things like that. I like it. I really do like it. Whether
mhm.
that's just colored glasses and just me having an extreme amount of experience with it, I don't know, but I do think that there's a lot of really healthy mechanics that can be introduced, and I think that Final Fantasy VII Remake reintroducing the ATB in a in which I thought was a really creative way did ultimately work. Although I do have some gripes about how they implemented some things around it.
Dude, I'm gonna jump into that right now because this is my biggest problem with the remake.
Oh,
I
okay.
fucking hate the ATB system as it exists in Final Fantasy VII Remake
Okay.
to the point where I think it may have ruined the entire game for me.
Wow. Yeah, that is significantly different than my experience.
Yeah, like, I mean,
Wow.
you can tell me how you feel about it. I would be really interested, to hear it. But, like, for me, I think every time that I died in the game, it was because that I couldn't do anything because I had no ATB
Hmm.
or, I got interrupted when I was trying to cast, and then your ATB you loot first of all, if you get interrupted when you're trying to cast, like, heal, for example, it takes your MP up front. So you lost your ATB gauge, you lost the heal, and you lost your MP. You just get screwed six way from Sunday if you get interrupted. And it for me, it was so frustrating when I'm trying to like mitigate the immense damage that like a character like Bahamut will do to you or something like that that like by the end of the game I was just kind of like, you know what? Fuck this game. I'm over this. Like this is not even fun to me anymore because when I what I noticed is like my frustration with things like that got way higher as the difficulty started to go up to where like when I'm battling Bahamut or I'm battling Sephiroth at the end of the game or whatever it is, if I got interrupted, I was like this game, I'll just turn this off. I don't want to play this anymore. I didn't do that, but like that's kind of how I felt internally, you know.
So yeah, wow, I did not struggle nearly as much. I made it a point to frequently switch characters.
Mm,
I was
mm,
always switching my characters to the point to where I think I might have played Tifa more than Cloud, because she
mhm,
is so fun to play. But jumping into the match with first strike materia, and if you master that materia, you have like a full ATB gauge right away.
mhm.
Usually, what I would do, and I kept yelling at you to do this, and you didn't do it, but I would always have my either my shell or my barrier materia tied to all, or my haste materia, like my time materia tied to all, and I would immediately haste everybody if I needed to, and that worked out beautifully for me. And using other materia that increased your ATB while you assisted or you blocked or you did specific things. Like I never really struggled with it. I used Barrett, his abilities, to gain aggro and also to soak up damage from other allies like his Iron Skin and stuff all the time, to where Barrett was my literal tank and he just
Mm.
took it on the chin and he saved my ass countless times. So, and him, Barrett has, his own innate abilities to just be interrupted less. He has his ability that he can trigger to where he basically just does not get interrupted at all. So I would frequently have my heals or like revive materia on him. So if I was in a really tight spot, especially during the Bahamut fight, because there's a moment where it's almost an instant KO for everybody,
Mm.
I would have him. I would basically prepare him to tank that hit, knowing everyone else is going to die, and then I would use his gained ATB that I would kind of just have hidden, knowing that that move was coming. Quickly bring everyone back up, and then go to just completely wrecking Bahamut. Bahamut took me 3 times to beat. The one that took me the most time to beat was Shiva. She took me
Mm.
forever, and I think it was because she's like the first one, and I just wasn't ready for it. But man, I grinded on her for. It took me so long to beat her. Bahamut, I struggled, but it wasn't terrible, terrible. Once I got a strategy in my mind, I executed.
I will say that Shiva was a really unexpected difficulty spike for me.
Yeah, because you get it right. You get it right away. Like it's like right when you talk to him, you complete a few of those challenges, which I really didn't super care for them. Whatever, but there's like a way to artificially give you summons and kind of ruin the mystery around the summons. Some stupid kids making gods. I didn't really like that too much at all, but yeah, it was a pretty big spike.
What's interesting to me about that is like that what you just described is probably my other major problem with the remake is that the changes that they made I almost universally hate.
So I did not like I didn't like him. I didn't like that you had to complete specific materia challenges and combat challenges. Mastering them all, like mastering all the green ones to get Bahamut, was a huge pain in the ass, especially if you don't anticipate having to master the revival materia, which takes forever.
Dude, I
Um,
did anticipate it, it still took forever.
yes, yeah, and the only reason that I did it is because in chapter 16, when you get to the Shinra actual battle room, like their simulator, there's a
Mhm.
way. There's one of the two-player ones you can run through really quick and then just cancel the match and then restart it immediately. And I was just doing that over and over again, and it took me about like 40 minutes, and then I had them all maxed out. But
Really?
yeah, yeah, actually, that was
Shit, I
kind of
should
yeah, that
why
was
didn't you
kind.
tell me that, man? You know how many hours I put into grinding?
Sorry, I said. Actually, did you get?
Not only did you not tell me that, but I hit you up and I was like, "Dude, I'm so pissed right now. I just lost like 3 hours of grinding because my power went out."
I don't think you
And you
were.
still kept that shit to yourself.
I don't think you were at that chapter though. I don't think you had gotten to that chapter yet.
I hadn't, but had you told me that, I'm like, "Oh, let me just go there then, and I'll do
Yeah,
this later."
yeah. Yeah, I should. I don't know. I figured you would have Googled it. I know. I Googled it. I looked it up.
I did. I never found anything like that.
Well, it's not like they don't give you an extreme amount of AP. It's that you just have it tied with the AP booster, and then you just rinse and repeat over and over again. You just don't fight the last one, which is a huge pain in the ass. Like the last one in that little trial. So you just quit after you beat the first 4 matches, and you just go back and do it again. And all it costs you is just gil.
Let me ask you this, did you do all of the combat challenges in
I
the,
did. I didn't go back and do the ones that are post game.
mm,
I didn't
mm.
do those. I'm I'm debating whether or not to do them, but You know, I think I would have done them if they were like, okay, you can get Bahamut during the normal gameplay, but if you go back and you beat all of these, including the apparently super pain in the ass final one, who's a boss, then you get like Neo Bahamut or like Bahamut Zero, and I get to see him shoot things from outer space. Then I probably would have done it, but because there was no significant advantage outside of just getting more of the skill books and opening up extra cores on your weapons, I just didn't really care about it because I was doing so much damage at level 50 anyway that okay, I was going to be a little stronger and do more damage, but I wasn't really going to. It wasn't just super worth it. There was no major benefit. There's not a different ending or something. Like God, I wish there
So,
was.
God damn it, I so wish there was. That ending, dude. I'm gonna come back to the ending.
Sure.
I did go back and try and do those missions, but like for me, it was kind of what I was talking about before, where I was so disenchanted with the game by the time I got to that point.
Hmm.
Those missions, specifically the last two, Marlboro and Pride and Joy, are so difficult.
Yeah, her Pride and Joy was so crazy hard.
Apparently, Pride and Joy himself is not that difficult, but since you have to defeat every summon in the game again before you can even fight him, and you have to do it in one run without dying, I was like, "Fuck this game, dude! I'm not doing this anymore."
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
which made me mad because like there was another one of those games where like I'm gonna complete this game just like I did the original Final Fantasy VII. Like I love Final Fantasy VII. I want to go through. I want to experience everything this game has to offer. But
Mhm.
like I hate the ending, which again we'll come back to in a second. And by the end of it, I hated playing it. So once I got to that point, I was like, it's not even worth it to me. I'm just not going to do this. And I put it down, and I've never picked it back up again.
Yeah, I mean, you got hit a lot harder than I did. So I think if you just had a different materia strategy, you would have had a better experience with it. Because I did not have the same type of negative. Like I thought the combat was overall really well done. I thought that there was a little bit too many materia, like combat materias. Like they should have introduced a mechanic where you didn't have to use materia slots for combat things. There should have been something that was just intrinsic to your character as they leveled up. That there was like
Yeah.
combat trees, like ability trees, and you can go, okay, I'm level 10 now. I'm gonna pick first strike, and first strike level 1 allows me to get this much of an ATB boost, and then I can choose to continue to level that up like a sphere grid kind of thing, I guess, or I can do something else and I can go along a different path. That's, I think, would have been way better than forcing me to use all these combat materia on characters when I just want to freaking use spells and cool things and I want to combine stuff with magnify materia. And oh, by the way, can I have more than one fucking magnify materia? Is that so hard to ask for?
Dude, I agree with everything that you're saying. I was actually thinking the same thing that like they really just needed a way that all of those like why is dodge a material? Like it's fucking
Oh,
ridiculous.
the deadly dodge.
Yeah, like these things that just should be part of your character, you have to do as materia on top of the fact that you have less materia slots than you did in the original Final Fantasy 7.
So yes, you do have less, and it's misleading because you think you're going to max them all out, but your armor that you get, the best one in the game, is nowhere near full at all. It's only like 4 or 5 slots, which I get it. You're leaving room for the other parts of it, sure, whatever. But like I'm looking at a list of the purple materia, and like the complete materia, and there's like deadly dodge, provoke, ATB assist, parry, Y.
That's
Uh,
what I was thinking of, not dodge, parry. Yeah.
auto cure, refocus. Like refocus should have been an event that happens in game or a side event that allows you to just use a new limit break whenever you want on whatever character you just choose.
S- Speaking of which, dude, there's a materia for a limit break.
Yeah, that's
What the
that's the
fuck,
refocus one.
dude?
Yeah, that's refocus. That's what I'm saying. Refocus should have just been like a separate, you know, maybe you go through in chapter 14. You go through the entire um Corneo's Coliseum, and then the win for the Coliseum actually I think is already refocus. I don't think you get it before that, but or you get it somewhere in there maybe, but maybe beating that whole thing, it's like okay, hey, you went through a Coliseum, your characters are just more adept, they're just more intelligent when it comes to battling. Guess what? You all get refocus now as a limit break ability, and all refocus does is just give you an extra ATB gauge, which would have been critical if it was available always for all people, so you can choose, oh man, do I want to use my damage causing or with Aerith my healing limit break, or do I want to use refocus and just get more ATB charges? But
Yeah.
instead, you had to put it on people. I never used refocus. I used it like once because you had to with the challenges, but it was never useful to me because I would so much rather just use the normal limit break and cause either massive damage or actually heal people. It was a
Yeah.
complete waste of a materia slot. Total freaking waste of it. A lot of these should have just been a separate mechanic that you gained and maybe put skill points into separately, or just make it like you have to choose, like there's no going back, and maybe late game you can reskill or something if by buying like using gil or something.
Yeah, dude, like I feel like because of the system that they created and the way that they distributed materia, a bunch of materia are just useless. But more importantly, like I feel like kind of circling back to your earlier comment about if I had used a different materia set or this, that, and the other, I kind of feel like this game steers you towards certain ways of playing it. And the way that I wanted to play it wasn't a very good strategy.
Yeah, it's I don't know, there's a lot of challenges. So let's talk about something I think they did right, the visuals.
Mm. Well, I we can agree to disagree about that.
Ugh. I think that they were beautiful. I think the game as a whole is incredibly beautiful. The facial animation and the detail and the personality that was put into the main characters is just stunning. Maybe other games have done it just as well. I don't have the greatest experience, of course, with games that really focus on those types of facial animation and really getting like really trying to drive an emotional connection. So there may be better examples that I'm just not privy of, but this one really hit home. I thought Jesse, Tifa, Aerith, Barrett, all of them were so emotive. They had great characteristics. They just looked great. I think maybe where you were going with your little disdain there was the background animation, maybe
It's
like looking.
100% correct.
Okay, okay. So I've heard this. Many people have complained that the the uh, the skyboxes that they used and stuff for both when you're on the lower plate and also when you're navigating below the upper plate looking down, that the quality is really low and subpar.
Yeah.
And yes, it does look that way. It does. I will submit my opinion of that. I think that there's a few reasons why why they made the artistic decision to do that, and I believe it's an
The
artistic decision.
artistic decision.
I
I can't
think
wait to
I
hear
think
this.
personally, I think it was an artistic decision. Yes. So I believe, and of course believe. I don't know. I believe
But
that it was
before you say whatever ridiculous defense you're about to come up with,
okay.
does this apply to the doorknobs too?
Nope. I'm not going to defend that at all. Or the doorknobs, the door, or the toilet paper. I'm not touching that. That
Okay.
that was
Noted.
yeah. They chose the wrong areas to reduce memory by not rendering a higher poly count for those things. I don't know what they were thinking. I think it was a bug, to be honest with you, that no one just caught. But I don't know.
Which is
Shitty
baffling
QA.
for a
Yeah.
game of this caliber. Like that's just completely unacceptable if that's
Yeah.
the case.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of enjoy it now for the meme of it because it's just funny. But yeah, it's pretty it's pretty big oversight, and it's not like adding an actual cylindrical piece of toilet paper or roll of toilet paper would have been that challenging to do. or adding maybe some reflective mirrors, or adding a door that doesn't look like, I don't know, PS1. But that is inexcusable, whatever. But the skyboxes, I think, was done artistically. So I believe this because, one, I think that they wanted to capture a little bit of the original art style, in the fact that the skyboxes, I believe, were also kind of pre-rendered. They were drawn, right?
Mm,
They they weren't 3D. You could tell that. They weren't 3D
yeah.
renderings. They weren't, actual assets. They were just a box. They were just an image. And I believe that they looked drawn to me. And if you zoom in, if you really look at it, I have a nice big 4K TV. I was looking right freaking at it. It's blurry. It's not very sharp. It's hard to distinguish any real areas, you know. So I think that they wanted to retain a little bit of that nostalgic art style, and they chose that area to do it in. And B, if if you just think about where they live, if you think about the under the top plate, there are literally vents that just vent out pollution from the Mako reactors into the lower plates, right? They just pump
Hmm.
it down in there. I think maybe what they were thinking was the just viewing the scenery through that much pollution and fog and distorted air possibly could warp the clarity, could make it a little fuzzy or hazy, because the distances that we're talking are significant, right? If you're standing on
Yeah.
if you're standing in the lower section, or in the slums of sector 7 or sector 5, wherever you are, if you look up, that plate is hundreds of meters above you. That's at least, it's not a mile, but it's, quarter mile maybe above you. It's a significant length. It's a significant difference. And I think the third reason they did it was to obfuscate scale. So there are many times where you're given the opportunity to look down into Sector 7, and they've already set an expectation as to what Sector 7 kind of looks like, at least a small part of it. I don't think they did a great job of scaling the plates personally. I don't think they ever, outside the first shot and outside the moments where you're either climbing up to the upper plates or you're navigating around the upper plate looking down, they don't do a very good job of scaling, because when you are in all the different sectors, you feel like what you're running through and what you're experiencing is all of them. Like you burst through sectors 5 through 6. Like it's a normal walk. Those things are freaking giant. So they never really give you a good sense of that scale. To me, I don't know. I never felt it very well.
Mm,
And also, getting back to my third point, they wanted to obfuscate the sector 7 and all the other sectors, what you expect, because if you look down on sector 7, you don't see seventh heaven really. You don't see familiar buildings or locations as you experience them in the chapters where you're actually there. You don't see that at all. So it's kind of like they're their own skyboxes, and then when you're there, you're in such a small portion of it, you just don't see it from above. It's hard to see or something. I liked it. I thought, of course, it was a little weird, but I mean, ultimately, I liked it. It reminded me of the original game, and that was enough for me. That was a very
that's.
long-winded way to defend it. I know.
I don't know that I can follow you on that line of thinking, but like I respect it. Like I
Mhm.
could totally see that being the case. It sounds like you put way more thought into that than was necessary.
I definitely try to justify the hell out of it. Yeah.
Speaking of reminding you of the original, though, how well do you think that this game did at capturing the original?
Um,
like to my point, you said earlier that you were trying to get your wife to like sit there with you while you were playing through it and experience this part of your childhood. Having completed it now, do you feel like that being somebody's first experience with the game would really give them any kind of a sense of what playing the original was like?
It's a tough question. My instinct is to say no, because Final Fantasy VII's a hell of a lot more than Midgar. Like, you forget the shit you do on Midgar pretty quick after you leave,
Mhm.
because it just gets really like you struggle to just keep up with what the hell's happening after that. So they they did a really good job in captivating me and letting me experience the moments that were just brushed by in the original game. The highlight, personally, of the entire game, I think, is Cloud's interactions with Jesse. I love them so much, and it makes,
Mm.
spoilers, her death um, significant, like way more significant. I have my own problems with the whole with some of that, though. Honestly, I have problems with some of the characters surviving when they shouldn't have. I actually got mad about that.
What? You
Yeah,
weren't down with Biggs just randomly being
no,
alive for no explicable reason?
nope. And Wedge, both.
Is Wedge alive?
Yes, yeah. Wedge lived at the end of it. He was there at the end.
Was he? The last time I remember seeing him was when he was thrown out the window.
No, Wedge. Okay. It's they already did that once to you. Of course, I guarantee he's alive. I
I mean,
guarantee.
I would infer that he's alive as well. I'm just saying, like, was he actually like for sure alive? Or are we just assuming so?
I thought it was dumb. You're gonna kill Jesse, but you're not gonna kill Biggs and Wedge.
Yeah, but you care about Jesse. You don't give a fuck about Biggs and Wedge.
They should have all died. And honestly, the whole section where you're running around as Aerith trying to save them and it showing everyone being saved and stuff, that part also kind of irked me because I wanted them all to die.
Dude, you would make a great member of Shinra's board of directors.
Yeah, watch out. Watch out, Hojo. But
Oh
well,
my god.
it cheapened it for me. Um I don't know. Like I sound like an asshole, but the original game was it made such an incredible impact when you see everyone running around in circles. You see as you walk up people falling off the pillar. I think they also had that shot in this one too. Um, I think actually, I think Biggs falls off the pillar and like lands in the bottom of it, and he dies like in the very beginning when you're going up it in the original game. I think I remember that happening maybe. But like that pillar drops, no one survives. There is no little encampment outside in sector 6. There is nothing. There is just death and Barrett shooting the debris that's there, which I didn't really get that scene either. I didn't get Barrett like really shooting away at the metal. Damn it, damn it all kind of. I He kind of did that a little bit, but it wasn't as impactful to me. I don't know. I don't know. I was a little let down by that whole experience, but I still loved what they did with Jessie. Loved her as a character. I loved the scenes with her. I loved the experience. Kind of wish I could have had her as in my party briefly and controlled her a little bit, like just her and her little machine gun and stuff, and her whack ass Final Fantasy armor that she has on. But
You know what pissed me off the most about this game?
what?
Kate Sith shows up.
Mm, in like one scene, right?
That's one scene too many.
They briefly showed him. I know you don't like Kate Sith. You don't
I
like
I cannot stand Kate
nothing
Sith.
wrong with oh my god, Sing, right? Is the one
With
who
what?
control the one who controls him. Sing is that his name? It's not Reeve.
Uh yeah,
It's
no, yeah, it's Reeve. It's Reeve.
I thought it was the lead. No, I thought it was the
No, it's Reeve.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, you can take my word on that one. It's Reeve.
I believe
I
you.
just
I
I
believe you.
just finished that game like what 2 months ago, maybe. It's definitely Reeve.
I thought the leader of the. Okay, yeah, you're right.
I believe you. I'm looking it up as we speak, but I totally believe shit, you were right. No, man, I can't stand Kate. Like, Kate Sith betrays you multiple times, and there's, like, nothing redeeming about his character, and yet I'm supposed to like, no, no, no. He even, like, ruined Moogles for me, man. Like, I can't. Kate Sith is by far and away the worst character in what is undoubtedly gonna be my hottest take in this entire episode, a game full of underdeveloped characters.
Mm,
And for the record, I mean the original Final Fantasy VII. Almost
oh,
every character in that game is wildly underdeveloped and more or less meaningless.
yeah. I'm not gonna fight that too hard because that was, you know, so long ago, and the level of storytelling and character development has just grown. So if they made that game from scratch nowadays, it would be a lot better, of course. But there's definitely some character development shown. Cloud shows some. Like the whole story is about his character development essentially, but it's not so much character development. Like his personality doesn't really change. It's just he finds out. It's a self discovery. He finds out who he is and stuff. But I guess.
The best part about Cloud is that he's what is probably my favorite narrative device, in that he's an unreliable narrator.
What do you mean?
Well, because at the beginning of the game, Cloud himself is under this, for lack of a better word, illusion as to who he even is. And as the game kind of goes on, you learn more about who he actually is, what actually happened 5 years ago, and all of that. But like, he's telling you what happened at the beginning of the game. And Tifa, who was also there, is like, Cloud, did that really happen? Are you sure about that? But doesn't want to call him out for his incorrect memory because she wants to baby him or whatever. Um, but like, you as the player, you don't really know that. You can see that Tifa's reacting to him, but you don't necessarily know the context of why she's doing that until later.
Hmm.
You just kind of take it as like, oh, she wasn't there, so she's asking him questions about why he's rifling through her underwear drawer. And but yeah, like, you come to find out that like everything the Cloud told you wasn't true. And then Sephiroth tells you what actually happened, kind of shatters Cloud's world, only to find out that what Sephiroth said also wasn't true.
So I completely agree with you. I think that's one of the best ways to tell. Like that is the best way to tell this story is through Cloud's eyes. And they get to use a lot of that quote unquote unreliable narrator to cover up a lot of the things that were happening and then reveal them surprisingly to you later. Um, I thought it was kind of weird and kind of cool how two parts in the game, two or three, but I think it's two. One of the other soldiers recognizes him and they like stop firing or they back off.
You're talking about the remake?
The remake, yes, sorry. That never happens
Hmm.
in the original one.
Yeah,
Well, can I say that?
I'm pretty sure it
I don't
doesn't.
think
I
I
don't
don't think it ever
remember that.
happens either, yeah. But
If it does, it's not like scripted, and I didn't see it, but I don't think it does.
yeah, I thought that was kind of cool. But going back to the character development of the original one, Barrett has some development, but that happens pretty quick. Like he's pretty much fully developed by the time you leave Midgar. Uh,
Which is like 2 hours into the game.
yeah, Sid, kind of. I mean, but his is kind of short.
Sid Sid is a complete POS, dude. Sid is the worst villain in this game.
And he's a what do you call him, a villain?
Yes, I did. Because he's an abusive prick to this woman who just wants to help him. That's the most toxic relationship I have potentially ever seen.
Yeah, and yeah, but then he kind of that's his whole arc though, that he does come around. Like he does have development. He
He does, but like, not until the game is over. And even then, it's just kind of like he never atones for his sins. He just kind of stops being a prick.
No, you're right. I can't think of anyone else that has any real character development, any main characters at least.
Because they don't. Tifa is exactly the same person at the end of the game that she was in the beginning. Aerith is dead. I would argue Barrett doesn't change either. He just we find out different things about him and he shows more of who he is.
So I don't
Who am I forgetting?
uh you're forgetting your favorite, Yuffie.
Well, I mean, Yuffie and Vincent are optional, and they're so underdeveloped that they're not even in cutscenes. So I don't really have anything to add to that. Yuffie is kind of the same as Kate Sith. Like she's just a POS to you the entire game, and then never does anything to redeem that. Really, you just kind of let her hang around.
So I don't require character development in my games though. I like it,
I
but
I'm not saying that I require it. I'm just saying that they are very static characters, which makes them really uninteresting generally.
I think that uh, I don't entirely share that opinion because I think that they're emotionally well equipped for the challenges that they face. I think that where they become interesting is you find out why they act the way that they do
Mm.
throughout the game. Like that's like you you retroactively understand their development in Final Fantasy VII. Uh, the leading star of that being Cloud, of course, but with every character, they are kind of the same way throughout the entire game, and you just learn their past and you understand why they are the way they are. Barrett, you learn a lot about his past. Um, Aerith, you learn a lot quickly. Tifa, you learn some stuff about her past, but she's kind of her personality is kind of blank. But
Bro, actually, now that you bring it up, Tifa's also kind of a POS. Like she was just a shitty kid to Cloud when they were little.
she was, yes, she kind of picked on him too with the other kids, but Cloud's the one that saved her when she fell through that bridge. He's the one that actually saved her life, and then
Yeah,
they
because
kind of
Cloud
changed
is
after
like
that.
Cloud is just like a heroic character. Like that's just who he is.
She changed her tune after that moment, but then he wasn't around for much longer than that because then he joined Soldier. Well, attempted to. He joined the
Yeah, I
army.
was gonna say no, he didn't.
He joined the army. So I mean, yeah, character development aside, whatever. Final Fantasy. All right. So what about character development in the remake?
Well, first of all, I think they do a much better job. I don't think that Cloud really has any more development than he did in the original, but certainly the members of Avalanche do. Sans Barrett and Tifa, who are virtually the same as in the original game.
Barrett, yes. Tifa, I think, has a little more depth.
How so?
She's motherly. In a weird way, Tifa's really motherly in the remake.
She was motherly in the original, man. That's why she doesn't just call Cloud out for his shit right away.
I know, but I really felt that in this one.
Well, yeah, I think that they do a better job about presenting it to you, but I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that these are fully voice acted characters who you can see emote and speak when they're talking. You can hear the inflection in their voice, see their actions. It's not just like conveyed to you, you know?
So I think that the I think Tifa had a more interesting personality than Barrett did. Although I do enjoy glasses off Barrett. When shit gets
Mm.
real, glasses off, and like you can really see how he feels behind those shades. I really enjoy those moments. Um, I actually preferred. This is gonna sound weird. I preferred everyone's personality. Okay, main character, playable characters. I enjoyed everyone's personality more than Aerith's.
Whoa! I was just about to say Aerith was my absolute favorite character.
I like Tifa more than Aerith,
How?
because
Why?
I like how spunky Aerith is. I like how free spirited that she comes off in this game. They definitely nailed that. Um, they gave her some type of what's the word I'm looking for? Like some future sight. Like they gave her some ability to just know what's going to happen in the future. I think she had that in the previous one, but she really flaunted it in this because she just kind of always knew things were going to work out. and in the original one, she really didn't kind of lead on to that very much.
Hmm.
Like she knew the plate dropping, she knew she was going to get captured, like she just kind of just already knew all of these things. She knew everything was going to be okay. The only part that she didn't know, which they made a point to bring up, was the very end when it goes Final Fantasy Kingdom 4 remake. Uh, so
So
yeah, but
here's
I so I like Aerith. I do. I love them all dearly, but she was my least favorite personality.
so let me ask you something because there's a point that I want to touch on, but I feel like I have to bring this up first. How did you feel about the addition of these ghostly characters? These like dementor looking spirits that are haunting around this game at certain points.
Oh. I thought it was dumb. I didn't like it at all, and then I suspended my opinion of them. So I remained optimistic throughout the entire game until I learned what they were, and then I was like, forget that. I didn't like them at that point. I thought that maybe they had some cooler. I thought that maybe they tied in somehow with the reunion. Maybe they were like souls of the people that had Genova cells, and they were somehow influencing this master plan to reunite everybody and get the cells back in. Yada yada yada. The whole story, right?
Hmm.
But it is absolutely not their goal. Their goal is
Yep.
dumb, and I did
This
not
is
like them after I learned that.
this is what I was going to bring up. So go on.
That's it. I mean, I don't have any more analysis other than that. That they
No,
were
not
just
necessarily analysis, but like, what is their goal? Go on. Like, let's talk about it.
they're essentially representations of, best way to put this, they represent the correct timeline, or they try and keep the proper timeline intact, or the series of events that is supposed to happen, like fate in line, right? So they
Hmm.
stop characters from doing things that they're not supposed to. Instead of creatively doing that and writing it out like good writers, they just have these stupid things happen, that just randomly save people or stop people because sure, and we can hit them. Why? Whatever. But they're just the biggest freaking plot device, and like I don't know what to even call them. I'm sure there's a term for it, but it's just a hack. I really didn't like it at all, and I thought it was gonna be a really thought provoking and ingenious thing that they implemented. I'm like, man, these guys are going to be something really cool. I bet it has to do with the reunion, and I bet it has to do with something larger that's going to span multiple games, and there's a reason that they're here. And then you just learn what they are, and you're just like, what the hell was the point of this entire fucking thing?
So I have to say, as much as I don't like the changes that they made in this game, just kind of generally, as much as I loathe the way they ended the remake, I actually thought that injecting these kind of spirits who represent the changes that they're making in the game and trying to correct the timeline back to the way that it was in the original game, and they're just like constantly failing, and more importantly, like making you the player stave them off so that they can't correct the timeline and this and that. I thought it was a really interesting choice. I think that that was like one of the more interesting concepts that they had for this game, at least in terms of like what they changed.
It's very artistic. It's very deep. If it's very
I
meta. It's
don't know about deep,
Well,
but
it's deep in the fact that it's very meta. So, as a relationship between a studio or game developer or writer and the player itself who has expectations like this, if you take yourself out of the actual story and you just worry about the relationship between what the developers and the writers of the story have to produce and how the user will experience them, it is beautiful because it represents that struggle of expectation versus what they delivered, right? and it represents maybe the challenges that they were up against. I get it. It's in that sense, it's awesome. It's really really cool. And if I want to just think ethereally and think that just kind of respect the meta aspect of it and take it as an just a representation like that, yes, awesome. But I don't want it still. I still don't want it. I I I respect that it's artistic and that it's intelligent and I respect that it's there. I understand why it's there, but I still don't want it ultimately. Where even if they still did it and then just ended a different way, I would be so much happier with that than the ending being Sephiroth found a way to break free will and fate, and then he's like an interdimensional enemy, and it got way too much. The guy was working on way too many Kingdom Hearts games.
Dude, I
It
could not agree more with
it,
that
it, it
statement.
reminded me of the end of the first Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah, well, not even like the end. Like that second to last boss is almost like
Oh yeah.
a one-to-one recreation of the first boss from the first Kingdom Hearts game. But like it's like he's got you know what's funny about it is like I think about Kingdom Hearts and how they took like a decade and a half, maybe more. I can't remember how long it was actually to come out with Kingdom Hearts 3. And I'm like, this guy is like obsessed with Kingdom Hearts, it seems, in this game, but he never comes out with them. And then I thought, actually, this guy is so obsessed with Kingdom Hearts, he can't stop coming out with them. He just can't like put his finger on writing a good fucking story, which is why we didn't get Kingdom Hearts 3, which is its own can of worms about how terrible that game actually is. And anybody who tells you different is just wrong.
I haven't.
Uh,
I haven't. So I dearly love the first two. I haven't played the third one yet. I do plan
I
on it
wouldn't
though.
I wouldn't bother, dude.
I
Like
still have to. I still got to play it. I'll
I
still.
love Kingdom Hearts 1, I love Kingdom Hearts 2.
Mhm.
But Kingdom Hearts 3 is truly a culmination of every Kingdom Hearts game that they've made in the worst way imaginable.
Well,
And it almost feels like the ending of Final Fantasy VII Remake is a continuation of that Kingdom Hearts pinnacle.
he just didn't need. It went 0 to 100 in 2 seconds. It didn't need to do that. It didn't. th- Just because you're trying to represent a split in some type of dimension or a subvert the expectation, or maybe you're breaking this grand universal engine of fate, right? Which is what they represent. You didn't have to send us into a wormhole and then break out into this crazy ethereal place. Like the end of the game is where they already were. Like the end of the Midgar section is where they freaking were. Why are they even
Mm,
there? The normal timeline is they're supposed to leave them. That's when they leave.
yeah.
They jump the freaking bridge and they jump over. However, I don't know how they don't die. Thinking back, but they jump the whole thing, and I think they just leave Midgar that way. They land on the other side of the wall. They're all there in their cars, and they're just super cool and badass with a little mini boss that happened, and that's it. You're out of Midgar, and then the story really opens up. So, as far as I understood it, they were following the the story. The only difference was that at the last moment there, Sephiroth appeared and like used his huge katana, which is awesome always, and and pierced open like created a portal like Kuwabara into an alternate dimension to break fate. It just didn't need to happen that way. I honestly feel like that is lazier writing than just creatively coming up with a way to subvert expectations, right? With finding like maybe changing something slight in Cloud's path and not just blatantly saying, "Hey guys, if you haven't figured it out, this is an alternative timeline. Are you ready? We're gonna totally we're breaking timelines here. There's Zach. Boom. Hey, everything's different." They didn't have to do that. He could have creatively made a small change in Cloud's past or someone's past, and then have that make a large impact on the direction of the game. Like make it to where it wasn't so obviously a break in the timeline, right? I don't know. It just felt hammed. It just felt so hammed up that he had to make a big spectacle that it was an alternative timeline, and then Cloud is somehow this even more omnipotent than the one winged angel breaking through freaking dimensions like he does. Like he's already more omnipotent than he was at the end of Final Fantasy VII when he causes a supernova.
Yeah.
It's
Here's my question, because you seem to be just as passionate about this nonsensical bullshit as I am,
so unnecessary.
to say the least. Would you have been happier if they made a one-to-one exact recreation with better graphics of the original game?
So would I have been happier if this game was the entire Final Fantasy VII
Hmm.
with maybe a slightly updated battle system and just better graphics without the expanded storylines and the character depth that we get from the other members of Avalanche?
No. Would you have been happier if it was exactly the same game, but it just looked better?
That's really hard. I mean,
Like
that
no upgrades. Like they just made the game again, but it looks great. It runs great.
so same
Like you
battle
get a
systems, same maps, same.
same everything. It's just you have
Oh,
nice graphics now. You have a nice open world. Um,
um, and we're still like isometric view, top down. You're not like like just ATB gate, like back to normal turn-based battles.
turn-based battles are gonna be exactly the same. Like if they really want to screw with something, I guess the isometric view of it could be changed, and you can make it like a more standard over-the-shoulder third-person game or something like that. But
What
but I
I
said, but my point is like graphically it's enhanced, but the game is exactly the same.
Okay, would I have spent full price on that game and then never looked back? Absolutely.
Uh huh.
I would have. Yes, I would have. Yeah, I mean, definitely. Yeah, because that's 70 hours. Well, I mean, yeah, 70 hours. That's 50 to 60 hours of the full game. Just better graphics, better dialogue.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like 60 frames per second.
yeah.
Like
I mean, absolutely. Yeah, I would be very happy with that. Of course. Matter of fact, they should do that. Get a smaller development team together and just crank out some of the old Final Fantasies. Like, give that to six. Or if you really want to make me happy, use the Octopath Traveler engine and start redoing 1 through 6.
Octopath. That's an interesting choice.
Yeah, well, I pick Octopath because it looks incredible. It's the best
Hmm.
2D, 2D representation, of those types of graphics that I've ever seen. I think that Final Fantasy VI with the Octopath Traveler engine would be incredible. I think that
You
would
know what?
be groundbreaking.
You know what could have been really cool is if they had done, if they had taken Final Fantasy VII and treated it like Dragon Quest XI on the Switch, where it has this nice like cell shaded 3D world,
Hmm.
so they could develop the entire world, do the entire game, and have this nice aesthetic, this modern aesthetic. It's 3D, it's great, everybody loves it. But also add in the feature that they pulled from the 3DS version where you can switch into 2D and you could play it like if it came out when Final Fantasy 4, 5, 6 came out on the Super Nintendo.
That would have been really difficult. I mean, that would have been really. I mean, the Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest XI Definitive Edition is truly a spectacle of a game in the amount of love that was poured into it. I mean, just pure. You can tell the whole country loves that game more than any other game. I think, right? I mean, that's a national
Uh
holiday when Dragon Quest gets released.
oh, you
Japan
mean
loves it. Yeah,
Japan.
Japan. Yeah.
I thought you meant the US. I was
No,
like,
no, no one gives a shit about it here. The only game like that in the U.S. is Call of Duty, probably.
even then, like there's a huge swath of people that fucking hate that franchise.
Yep,
But here's my problem with that argument. They're made by the same company.
I know. Different teams. I don't know. I don't know. I felt like what we got wasn't derivative of the amount of time they had to work on it, and I feel like I feel like they really rushed the ending. I think something happened and they just couldn't deliver the ending, or they were fighting amongst themselves, or they were just having some kind of internal struggle with how they wanted to end the game. And they I think they could have done a lot better. I really do think that they could have done a lot better. I mean, that being said, it's still a 9 out of 10 for me. I still love the game, and I can accept the game in its state with the decisions that he made, as long as I never see those hooded fuckers again. As long as, okay, we get it. You broke the timeline. We're in a different timeline. We shouldn't have to experience any of that crap anymore. Just show us an original and unique story that has now veered off the original path, and then just give us something creative and good. Don't don't force something like that down my throat again.
You know what really concerns me is that Nomura's comments about the game afterward seem to imply that he just wants to get it over with, and they haven't even like scratched the surface of Final Fantasy VII. If he's already like, man, I just want to get this shit over with and be done with this game, I have real concerns about the rest of these parts.
They they need to give it to somebody else. If that's the kind of crap that they're dealing with, just let him helicopter direct it or produce it, and give final creative rights to somebody else. If that's the kind of attitude that's going to happen, because although I him in 97 is clearly different than him in 2019 and
Oh, yeah, that's
2020.
without question. You know what's funny is like following that man's career as I have unintentional. I actually didn't even know who he was until fairly recently, but like I played almost every game he's worked on. He seems like the kind of guy who came into the industry bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and like wanted had all these grand ideas and he was going to do all these great things, and he did do all these great things, and then he did all these great things and thought, "Fuck." And now that he's an older guy, he's just like, I don't want to deal with this shit anymore, man. I just want to like collect a paycheck and go home.
I think that happens to some people. He doesn't. He's
And to be clear, I'm not saying that that's actually his mind,
sure.
his state of mind, but like it just kind of comes off that way. All of his games kind of seem samey to me, and like he doesn't seem to have the passion for it when I watch him in interviews and shit like that.
Has he worked on any other unique franchises besides Kingdom Hearts in the last 10 years? Because I can tell you one thing, if I had to juggle the story and universe of Kingdom Hearts like he has, I think I would be pretty tapped out by this point too. And then you get to Final Fantasy VII, you're like, oh my god, what the hell was I even doing with this? I'm sure he's done other things, but any major franchises that he's been able to soak his teeth.
All right, so last 10 years, Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy, Dissidia Final Fantasy, 13-2, which everybody loved. Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy All the Bravest, Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy 13-3, Kingdom Hearts, Mobius Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts, Dissidia Final Fantasy, character designer for Cloud in Super Smash Bros. World of Final Fantasy, Final Fantasy 15. I was gonna say, oh, it looks like he was the main character designer for Tekken 7, but actually he just worked with them because they had Noctis in that game. Final Fantasy 14. Oh, he got a special thanks in the credits of Final Fantasy 14. That's good to know, I guess. The only other franchise that he's worked on of any real note in the last 10 years was he was the character designer for the DLC portion of Xenoblade Chronicles 2.
Which was substantial, if I remember correctly, right? Like that was a hell of a DLC they put out.
Well, I mean, it was basically just a shorter standalone game. It was an expansion, but still, he was only a character designer on that, so I don't know if I would even count that.
Maybe not.
So to answer your question, has he worked on anything significant in the last 10 years? No.
And that shows in Final Fantasy VII. He got too comfortable with the Kingdom Hearts universe, and he tried to put that into Final Fantasy VII. And
Actually, to really put it into perspective for you, the last game that he worked on as a creative producer that wasn't Final Fantasy looks like honestly like Final Fantasy 7. Um, but Final Fantasy in general or Kingdom Hearts related was The World Ends With You on DS in 2007.
didn't that get really good reviews? Like, didn't people like that
Dude,
game a lot?
That game is incredible.
Yeah.
I love that game. It sucks on Switch. Um, like, do not play it on Switch. It's awful. But on if you play it on DS the way it was meant to be played, that game is really good. And actually, they just announced that they're coming out with an anime based on it.
We're also making an anime about Cyberpunk 77.
Are they really?
Yeah, that was part of the release that they did
That's
earlier this week.
dumb, but all right.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, something new. But yeah,
Oh
I
my
mean,
god, dude.
he sounds like he's stretched pretty thin. And
Dude, I just for giggles,
yeah,
I went back through his entire work catalog. He's never done anything of any real note except for Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts. And The World Ends with You. The only other thing he's ever done is character like minor character designs for certain games, character supervision, things like that. Like he's his only real noteworthy positions were as like creative director, directors, things like that are all Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts.
I'm sure there's an argument to be made that that's why he's been successful. They're like, oh, he's a diehard. He puts all of his effort into these. That's why they're so incredible. And then I would retort with, but the ending of Final Fantasy VII Remake. What happened
Yeah,
there? And I haven't played
yeah.
Kingdom Hearts 3, so I don't know. But I know that Kingdom Hearts story, not that I even want to get into this, but has gone way off. It went, not is going, it went crazy off the rails. Um,
We could do a whole thing on. And in fact, I would love to do an episode on Kingdom
I
Hearts. Go back and play that.
I'm
But
I'm not informed enough to even begin to have like any type of podcast about that because it's too vast. There's too many games, too many different story elements, too many characters. I
yeah,
couldn't
but how
keep up.
fun would it be to just go back and play the first one and talk about it?
I played the first one so much. I would actually prefer to play Chain of Memories
Oh,
because I had never played Chain of Memories. I tried to play it via emulation a few years ago, and the first hour of the game I actually kind of liked. And I don't like card games. I don't like games with card mechanics like that. Outside of this RPG for GameCube called Batten Kaitos, which I thought was awesome, but
oh, Bot and Kaitos is so good,
yeah,
dude.
yeah, the game is awesome.
Yes,
Yeah,
hell
yeah,
yes,
no one knows about that game. That game was legit, dude.
dude. I love the GameCube. It was probably my favorite console back then.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to bring up about. Oh, you know what I did want to bring up about Final Fantasy VII is the optional bosses.
Okay.
So, like in the original game, really the only one that existed was Ultimate Weapon. And then they re-released it. I think in Japan it was the International Edition, but in America it was just the edition that we got, which added Ruby, Emerald, and Diamond Weapon. And while Diamond Weapon is certainly nothing to write home about, Ruby and Emerald Weapon are a hell of a challenge, and but they're like a cerebral challenge. It's like a puzzle that you have to figure out. If you recall, like in my last stream of Final Fantasy VII, I actually showed off how you can beat Ruby Weapon without even touching the controller.
The-
So it's
the-
it's not so much that they're difficult; it's just a thing you have to figure out.
yeah.
Whereas in the remake, you have Pride and Joy, which is a boss rush
Hmm.
with all the summons, and then this robot, which I've heard isn't particularly difficult after what you've been through before that. But the game's too hard for me to know. I'm a big baby. Um, and Marlboro, which I did fight and is very hard, very very hard. Um, so I'm curious, like how you feel about super bosses in general, but also like how they handled super bosses in the original and the remake.
The original game had spikes, so really heavy spikes. I guess they both do. You know, I remember in the original game there were periods where you were going through and you were more or less leveled and prepared for everything that you fought, and then you ran into, you know, certain things that just completely wrecked you. I remember the boss that you had to fight when you open up the safe. to go get Vincent, right? Like to get the key. That
Oh
boss
yeah,
that
yeah,
boss wrecked me.
yeah.
I remember fighting the basilisk. I always forget the name of the enemy, like right in the open world. Trying to
Oh, the
fight that
Midgar
golem,
Zalem. Zalem.
Zolan. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, of course, the weapons are
Hmm.
extremely challenging, but you're right. They are kind of a puzzle. They're not hard once you learn how to defeat them. They're just you just have to kind of figure it out. Um, so and there's a number of other smaller little bosses. There's the one in the sewers in Midgar that can jump out and surprise you. There is a few other surprise bosses that have interesting mechanics. I remember there was this dual like two-headed dragon that you had to fight one time, and you had to kill the heads, and one head was like fire and ice or whatever. So not too bad. Final Fantasy VII, I thought did more or less the same. I thought the materia battles against the summons were pretty fun. Bahamut was not difficult after you learned the strategy, right? After you figured that puzzle piece out and you learned how to survive his ultimate attack and then bounce back, revive, and then just kind of tank out the rest of his battle and hope to God
Hmm.
you don't get him to do it twice, which never happened to me, thankfully, but I couldn't imagine. The only boss, I think the hardest boss in the entire game for me in Final Fantasy VII Remake was Hell House.
Oh.
Hell House surprised the shit out of me because it's so early in the game. I
Hmm.
I wasn't used to changing up my magic as rapidly as it required, and it didn't obviously display when the first few times I fought it. It wasn't obviously displaying when you needed to switch your magic. So it had subtle hints like the house was a little on fire, or the house was flying in the air, then use arrow, or the house did something and you knew to use ice. I forgot what the ice one was, but um, like you had to counter it with the magic, and then that would break the barrier, and then you can actually do real damage to it. That one definitely required a learning curve, but that was the hardest I struggled the entire game. Everything else was fine. No, never mind. The second hardest boss in the entire game was the final round of pull-ups.
That's
that
true.
was that was the second hardest boss in the game, I think. I could not get over 42 pull-ups for like 30 minutes, 40 minutes. I was sitting there, I kept failing every freaking time. I was getting so mad. And then all of that for just a champion's belt, which is okay accessory, but not like a groundbreaking one.
So it's funny to hear you say that Hell House was the hardest boss in the game. I do think he's challenging, but the problem with me or for me with Hell House is that it's not so much that Hell House is hard, it's that Hell House is bullshit. Like the fact that Hell House essentially, unless you hit him with specific magic at some given time, is for all intents and purposes totally invincible. It's just nonsense. And also, the game actually pulls this bullshit like multiple times. There are like several enemies in the game that will just like throw up a barrier and then you're just screwed. You can't do shit.
Yeah, the worst ones were the sentinel bosses. There's like these little sentinels. There's it's a second or a third version of them require you to. It's not a specific type of magic. It is whatever they're hit with first, they throw that barrier up, and it's not a normal barrier. It completely nullifies pretty much all of it. So
Yeah.
those were challenging because they were always thrown in with other things that I didn't want to worry about too. So it was balancing. Okay, they're gonna wreck me right away. So I've got to focus them first because they're just going to sit in the background, just shoot me with lasers. So yeah, it was annoying, those ones, but no other, man, no other boss like Hell House really had me on the ropes. I died a number of times through different bosses, but none of them really like that one.
Yeah, I think you know what? Fuck Final Fantasy VII Remake. I'm done talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake. That game, in my opinion, that game, in my opinion, is a disgrace, straight up. And I say that with all due respect because I do think that they worked really hard on this game. I think that they did a good job in many, many places. But for me, for what I wanted out of Final Fantasy VII Remake, they missed the mark in almost every single regard. And I don't know that I'll ever play that game again, although I might. When the sequel comes out, they're going to have a steep hill to climb to convince me to play that.
Yeah, I mean it affected you a lot more more than it affected me. I don't have that much of a scathing opinion of it. I do think that it was a very good game, and I think that for me it got me about 80% there, which is pretty. I know that's pretty forgiving. I know, but my number one gripes were split up the materia, give us a separate ability tree. Don't waste my materia slots with physical stuff. I don't want to worry about that. It's magic. Why physical things have no business being involved with materia whatsoever. It doesn't make any sense. The summons split up split up getting summons to where it's more special. The only summon you find in the wild is the freaking chocobo one, the first one you get, and you find that behind a stupid um, wind turbine if you are smart enough to backtrack slightly to get it. Make that a little more special. Make that mean more than just some nerdy kid coming up with it and saying, I invented a new materia. And then you having to fight the materia and beat it. Okay, fight the summon. Maybe you do fight the summon. Maybe you find it IRL and you capture it or something. Give us a different mechanic, right? Maybe all the times that you went into these materia labs, like the new random enemy that they made, which Hojo developed, was like this proto human that was like magical, which ultimately ended up being useless because it was just fodder. You just hit them enough times and they die. There was no mechanics around it at all. They were stupid. Maybe all the times that you were actually down there in the labs, maybe you stumble upon a summon materia and you find like an empty shell of a materia and you're able to recapture it somehow. I don't know. There's better ways that you could have done it than the way it was implemented. Um, I also could have done without any of the fate crap going on whatsoever. I think that you could, if you wanted to express that you were changing the timeline in a significant way, there would have been a better way to do it than having you fight some god of fate and then the arbiters of this god, because you don't ever fight him directly outside of Barrett just shooting him with his gun, whatever. Um, Fighting the arbiters is just fighting three spectral figures that can only be hit, but no, not only be hit, that represent different types of fighting styles. So you have to just be strategic as to how you fight them. I thought if you wanted to go the whole circumventing fate uh, uh, style that you were going for, timeline, circumventing the timeline, maybe instead of having them just random spectral figures, why don't you just fight yourselves? Why not just make like shadow copies of the characters and you fight them, except they are the representations of the original timeline and you're fighting against it? That would have been a hell of a lot more impactful and made a lot more sense than just these random figures that they were just lazy and they're just like, we'll just scribble on our pads and we'll just make them look this way, right? We'll give one a bow and arrow, one a sword, and the other one does magic, I think, if I remember. Or no, a gun. The other one had a gun. Um, there's just a lot of different ways they could have done this, and I think that the inspiration is left, has left him, and someone else might need to take over for the second part. But that probably won't happen. But if it does, I would be interested to see if they are a fan of the original and they try to keep to the source material but implement their own unique story, or they just go even further into Kingdom. Like I don't want it to go even further into Kingdom Hearts. I don't want it to get crazier. I don't want Fate.
Can you imagine Mickey just shows up in the sequel?
I don't I don't want that. And the scary thing is there's already a precedent set for it because Cloud and Sephiroth were in the first
Oh
one.
my god, you're right.
Yeah, and they were both in there. Think about it. The
Oh
only
my god.
the only thing I would like if they did, and I would actually not like, I would love this. You break away the story away from Cloud, you control other characters because Cloud goes missing for whatever reason. He gets sucked through a portal or something. And then you go through some side quest, you do something substantial with the side characters. I don't know, it could be anything. Then you come back and then you find Cloud and you're like, "Where were you? What happened?" And he's like, "I don't want to talk about it." And they just imply that he was sent to the Kingdom Hearts 1 world and was in the arena and fighting and everything. They just imply it. They don't explain it. It's just implied for like a brief little section of the
Ugh.
story. I'd be okay with that and nothing more. But I mean, yeah,
It's funny that we have basically the same complaints about this remake, and it impacted us in different ways to where like I really can't stand this game at this point, and you're just kind of like, yeah, I hate like the whole game, but
well, because
still 9 out of 10.
Well, because I don't hate it. I just disagree with the choices that they made. I'm just disappointed, right? I'm gonna dad it for a second. I'm just disappointed in his decisions.
You could be a mainstream website reviewer, man.
I am
Everything about this game is awful. 9 out of 10.
Yes, I am forgiving. I am, and usually I err on the side of optimism. So I am a little more, oh, it's not all that bad, guys. I cheerleader things. I definitely do that, but I love this game so much that I don't think I can let myself hate it. Like I love Final Fantasy VII so much, I don't think I could look negatively on the remake. I think that would just break me. I think that would like that's my fighting the my own fate timeline. Like for me to say that I hated this game, spectral figures would come in and tear my headset off of my head. I would have to fight them back and just to respond to the question. I think it's still a really good game. I don't want to disparage all of the leaps and bounds that they made with just explaining really hidden parts of the story, explaining and expanding on characters, giving us beautiful visuals, just taking us back. Um, adding, I could have done without the three parts of the game where there were just like stupid little side quests. I don't mind side quests in my RPGs, of course, they're necessary, but I would like some better ones than that. Um,
Ooh.
I don't really, I didn't think that they were all that great. Some of them were okay, but most of them were just kind of miss for me. They were just they felt chory. Um,
Well, you heard it here, folks. Jordan actually hates Final Fantasy VII Remake. He just won't let himself say it.
no, I like the game. I really do. I'm not enthralled by it, but I do like it. I do. So I'm looking forward to the next one.
Are you really though?
Yeah, I
Or
am.
are you not just a little bit worried about what could possibly come out of this studio next?
Well, I have been. Let's see here. I have been the unfortunate victim of many of my favorite franchises falling flat on their faces. Star Wars being one of them. So I'm used to the pain that's involved with that. Hopefully they don't do that, but if they do, I can just forget it ever existed and buy it on Steam. And there's this incredible mod that uses AI image rendering and redoes all the backgrounds into high res and adds like via like the AI engine, it adds and enhances the backgrounds to a point to where they look incredible. So I can just play a super modded version of the original one, and I think kind of get the faux remake that I always wanted. So that's my backup. I'll have to just live
Mm.
with that.
So I know that we didn't really touch on this ended up being more about the Final Fantasy VII remake than the original game. But is there anything else that you wanted to touch on in the original game before we start to wrap up?
Really quick, if you went to if you talk to somebody,
Yeah.
I may know this answer already, but if you talk to somebody who says they want to get into RPGs and they're interested in Final Fantasy VII, specifically 7, I know you would probably recommend something different, but specifically 7, if they said, which one should I play, the original or the remake? Which one would you recommend for someone right now?
Um, I think that depends on why they're interested in Final Fantasy VII. Like, if they want the story of Final Fantasy VII, there's no question they need to play the original. If they want to be like a cool kid with a big fucking sword, then it kind of depends on what their personal taste in games is. Like if they're more of a action adventure actiony type of game player, then like yeah, play the remake. That's fine. Um, I guess what I'm saying is I'm gonna recommend Final Fantasy VII, the original game, probably in all circumstances, unless the reason that they're interested in Final Fantasy VII is because they think the characters look cool or something, and they just want to be a cool guy with the big fucking sword or something like that. Like the all the story is in the original game. The original game's a lot longer. The original game's a lot deeper. And sure, there are definitely things that are better in the remake. The graphics specifically are obviously much better, but if you're honestly interested in Final Fantasy VII, think I think that you'd be doing yourself an injustice playing the remake instead.
Okay. I think I, I think I share that opinion. Um, if I was walking down the street and a 12-year-old was walking by me and just looked at me and said, "Should I play the remake of Final Fantasy VII or the original?" and I had like 2 seconds to respond before I was walking into like a Moe's or something to get food, and I didn't care to talk longer than that to a 12-year-old, I would say, "Yeah, play the remake," and I would just close the door behind me. Like that would be my 2-second recommendation to somebody who obviously never experienced it, but it was also probably a little bit younger, getting into things. If it was someone my age that walked by me and asked, I would probably recommend the original. Because I worry that things don't translate very well and things age a little bit harder on most. But I think if you're around our age, then you can kind of respect it and you can get into it a little bit more. But then thinking about that, I also struggled because I was 12 when I played it. So, but things were different
Here's
back then.
I guess my question then is like if you were trying to get a kid into video games, like if you had a kid and you were trying to get them into video games at a young age, are you going to introduce them to the classics or to modern games that might be more attuned to modern children's sensibilities?
I don't think you can always make that decision. I think that the kid's going to make that decision. I think the moment you try to pressure or like influence them to do something, they're not going to do it. But if you make it out to be something great, then they will. So it's a weird response, but I saw a post today that I thought was kind of cool. This guy had a kid that was maybe like 9 or 10, and the
Hmm.
kid wanted a PlayStation 5. So the dad said, "Okay, I will get you a PlayStation 5 at launch day if you beat the original Ninja Gaiden on SNES before that." And then
Brutal.
yeah, and then the post below it said he's been on the first level for like an hour now. you know? So I think that maybe I'll pepper in things like that, or maybe I'll play the game and then I'll see if they're interested in it. I think that's probably the best way to do it. That's kind of how I was introduced into some video games when I was younger. I saw other people playing it and I'm like, oh, this kind of looks really cool. Like that's how I got into Pokemon. Someone had a Game Boy out in summer break, and we were out in the fields playing and stuff like that. Someone had us
Out in the fields.
out in the fields, and we were playing like softball fields and stuff, and we were all just playing, doing random stuff. And this kid had a Game Boy. He was playing Pokemon, and I remember that we were in battle. We were watching a Kakuna. He was in Viridian Forest. We were watching a Kakuna, and our dumb 8-year-old minds thought if we sat there and watched it long enough in the middle of a battle, that it would evolve.
Mm.
So I remember watching him play that for like 15 minutes, just running around, finding Pokemon, catching them, and then like talking about the Pokemon. I remember he had a Bulbasaur, and I could not picture what a Bulbasaur looked like for the longest time because the rendering from behind in the battle scene for Bulbasaur in the first gen is terrible. He looks so bad.
Those big bug eyes, man.
He looked terrible, and I just could not like. I couldn't imagine what Bulbasaur looked like until I got the game, and then also subsequently bought the player's guide for it. Um,
Mm.
the one that had the stickers for the Pokedex, so I get to put the sticker on the Pokemon entry when I catch them. I still have that somewhere, actually.
Probably one of those would probably be valuable if you had one that some kid didn't destroy the stickers on
Oh
now.
no, I used every sticker. Oh yeah, I wrote in it everything. I like I said, I think I still have it. I still have one of my original Ocarina of Time guides too.
Oh.
Yeah, that thing's been used. It had a little check box at the end of it for all of the collectibles and all like the different seeds. So I forgot what they're called already. The pods, the seed pods, magical beans, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So like I was checking them off and dating and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean I would try to get them into the original, but I got into it because there was nothing else. But there's so much else now to captivate young kids. It's so competitive that I think as a parent you'd be lucky if they played it. It would be a really
Mm.
special and fortuitous thing if your kid was like, "Hey, I want to play Final Fantasy VII." You're like, "Oh, the remake? Okay, I'll buy you the remake." Like, no, the original. And then I think you would just start crying. I know I probably would. I'd be like, "Oh God, I raised you right."
I mean, all things being fair and equal, I mean, there's a lot of RPGs being played in this house, so if he does uh take an interest in the things that I'm into, like him asking to play Final Fantasy VII is a distinct possibility.
Well, I hope that happens. I hope he just I hope that he's not playing Fortnite too.
All this hate on Fortnite, it's just a game,
It's
man.
just fun to hate it. That's why. It's just fun to hate it because Epic was like the only thing they've ever done, and it was so huge for them that they were able
It's
to.
Did you just say Fortnite is the only thing Epic has ever done?
The only
I'll wait while you Google Epic.
God,
Don't worry.
Killing Floor. No, hold on. I'm on the store. What else have they done?
Well, I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is this little game you might have heard of called Gears of War.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they did make that little game a while ago, and the sequel, and the sequel to the sequel. And then they sold it to this little startup company called Microsoft. But, nothing really.
Okay, so Fortnite, Gears of War, and Infinity Blade. Oh, they developed the Unreal. Oh, they developed the Unreal Engine. Duh. That okay.
Oh,
Duh.
yeah, there's that little thing. I assumed you knew
Yeah,
that.
sorry. And they also developed the best gaming engine that there is. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't
Ugh,
even think that was needed to be said. Oh
I
my
forgot.
god, man.
I'm tired,
You were
man.
really
I'm
you're
ta-
really like out of it.
I'm tapering off. I'm tired. I forgot these things.
Yeah,
But yeah,
that's fine.
that's I don't really have anything more to say about Final Fantasy. I recommend the remake to anybody that wants to play it. I had a great time with it, so I will probably circle back to it eventually and beat it on hard mode, like doing the
Good
chapters,
luck.
doing the chapter select. I'll let you know how it is, but it's not happening anytime soon.
Dude, hard mode is so hard. It is so hard.
Yeah, the
Like unbelievably hard.
the non NP um regen is pretty pretty ruthless. And then no items and matches, pretty ruthless.
Like, there's no way to recover your MP. It's crazy, man. It's so that's the kind of thing that, like, I see that, I'm like, "That's just spiteful, man." Like, you didn't need to do that to make this hard.
Yeah, it's gonna be real grindy. I'm sure it's gonna be very grindy.
Well, I think unless you wanna sit here for another 2 hours and, cover the entirety of Final Fantasy VII, which has been covered 600 billion times, that's that's about all I got, man.
No, that's all I have. I mean, Final Fantasy VII is incredible. One of my top 5 games of all time. Shaped my gaming future forever when I played it. So I'm only ever going to talk good things about that.
Right on. I mean, I love Final Fantasy VII too. It's definitely a top 5, RPG for me. Probably 5 if I had to rank it, but that's another topic for another time. Until next time, I have been Dean, also known as Endless Cola, in places around the internet. You can find all the links for appropriate social media and such below in the description, as well as, and I want to bring this up at the end of the show this week because I find it personally really topical at this point. But if you go to my Twitch, if you go to any of our YouTube videos, down in the description, you will find a link where you can donate to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And I highly encourage that if you have the means, do so. We don't have enough focus on mental health in this country, and the more that we can do to change that, the better. You don't have to donate to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, but if you can donate to some charitable organization that helps with these kinds of things, it's always appreciated. Until next week, have a good one, guys.